Fantastic. Okay, well, welcome everybody. This week we are back with Scott, the bench doctor, and he's finally going to finish the trench gun. Got
Yay.
all the parts. He's done stuff to it. He's going to tell us all about the adventure. If you are in the actual Zoom, you know the drill. Drop questions there. One of our fine moderators will pick them up, Danny and Kyle. If you are watching this on Facebook, we'll try to take a spin through there to see if there are questions. The folks on Twitch and on Twitter and on the main Facebook page, be patient. We'll try to poke around and see if we can get to questions. But as always, Scott usually more than willing to troll through all the comments and all the various platforms and make some responses here and there. So I believe the folks on Discord are watching this on our YouTube channel, and I think we're ready to go. Did I miss anything in the intro? Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Scott.
All right. Well, welcome. I'll recap. This was a Winchester Model 12, just a standard old commercial shotgun. The goal was to make a World War I/World War II trench gun. And to do that, you're limited to a few guns, the Ithaca 37, the Winchester 1897, and the Model 12, and then some of the later variants got into the 870 and things like that. But the ones that are really considered the trench guns were the Model 12, the 97, and the Ithaca 37. So I grabbed the first good deal I could see. I didn't want to chop up a really nice old shotgun. I wanted to make one, but out of a gun that had probably seen its better days. So I won this gun on an auction for, I believe it was $230. I can't recall. It was fairly inexpensive, and there was almost no bluing left on the receiver, and the barrel was pretty spotty. So I figured it was a good donor for the project, and the gun will live on much longer, I think, as a trench gun clone than it would have as a usable field gun. So a couple months ago, or I can't remember when it was August or September, I started by chopping off the barrel to the required size, and showed people kind of how I chop barrels. It's not the only way to do it, but it's the way I found to do it that works pretty well. I then took the gun and completely disassembled it and re-blued it. I used a rust bluing technique, and then put the gun back together and test fired it. I took it down to California to Alessandro's class a couple of weeks ago, and Lonnie brought his Ithaca 37, and we kind of had a slam fire party at lunch, and it was a lot of fun. So that's what got us here. I had ordered the parts that make it a trench gun. In its current configuration, this would be called a riot gun, which this configuration was used by corrections officers and police, military police in this configuration with just the barrel cut to 20 inches. And that's 20 inches measured from the back of the chamber. So, as it is, we could just call this a riot gun and call it a day. But I wanted a trench gun, and this is what makes it a trench gun. This is the handguard, the heat shield, and it goes over the top of the barrel, and it clamps on with these 3 screws. And it has a bayonet lug right here. And then rather than using all of this mechanism up here to join the magazine tube to the barrel, it has this clamp. There's a spring in there. It's a pretty involved little mechanism, and it's the same as it on the 1897. It's really the same stuff. But all of this gets removed, and the front of the magazine tube gets replaced with this piece, which then mates up to a hole right here. Let me see if I can get this to show up right here. The magazine tube fits in there like that. And then this is what connects the magazine tube to the barrel, so it doesn't wobble and vibrate itself to pieces. And it also has a sling loop on it. And so finding this piece was the hard part. This is really the heart and soul of the trench gun. And there are some aftermarket ones I've seen for sale, some cheapy ones for like $99, but all the reviews I read of them where they were just really cheap, really thin metal, and that they didn't really look good and they certainly didn't work well. So there's a guy, if you know, after the video, if you want further information, I can post it on Discord or something where I got these parts. And so you have to order this piece for the correct gun and this piece together. Otherwise, this doesn't do you much good, just this piece. So, but I can give you the information. And I think out the door, it was $207. And when I got it, it was in the white. It was just plain bare metal. So I had to sand it down, and I used the same technique on the handguard that I did on the gun itself, which is to I sanded it down with I got to 320 grit, which is the finish that they recommend for the bluing chemicals that I used. And so I sanded it, and then I degrease it with naphtha, and then I put on rubber gloves and I apply the rust bluing chemical, let it flash rust overnight. Then you boil it and you keep going through that process until you get to the color that you like. And it's not showing up very well, but this bluing has a little more of a wear look to it, which I kind of liked. I didn't want to I could have gone one more pass, maybe two, to get it to look exactly like the gun. But I wanted it to have some worn look. I want the gun to wear naturally and get that natural wear pattern on it that a real trench gun would have. So I liked it the way it was. And I would guess, I don't know, that the two finishes probably weren't the same when the guns were assembled. I'm sure the Winchester probably took a lot more care bluing the shotgun than the manufacturer did to blue the handguards. So anyway, that's the story up to this point. Oh, and also you'll notice that the aiming bead is on the handguard. So when you cut your barrel off, here's the piece that I cut off, and it had the bead on it. So we lost that, but it's on the handguard. So otherwise, what you'd have to do is find dead center on this and drill and tap it. And I don't know if you've ever tried to drill and tap a shotgun barrel, but it's not fun. It's very thin, and there's only a few threads. So it's not as easy as you would think to do. So anyway, after this was blued, I soaked it in oil to, what that does is remove all the moisture from the metal, and you leave it for about 24 hours soaked in oil, gun oil, motor oil, mineral oil, whatever you want. And I went to test fit it, and going on the end of the barrel, it was super loose. It would just slide on, and I could not tighten it down tight enough. It would just spin. I just could not get enough clamping power on it. And I called the manufacturer. I emailed him, and he said, "Yeah, they're all handmade, and sometimes there's variants. And so what you could do is shave this down, or send it back, make another one." I didn't want to wait 2 more months for another one to come back, and I'd already blued it. So he probably would have squawked about that anyway. So the solution I came up with, rather than alter this piece or the plan I came up with, was to make a sleeve for it. So I took a piece of steel. This is just a it's regular steel sheet metal, and I made a sleeve that fits inside here. And that was sort of a fun head banging experience, because I had to get the wall thickness of this. I couldn't too thick and the guard wouldn't fit, too thin the guard wouldn't tighten up. So there was a lot of trial and error to get to where I had the exact thickness of sheet metal that would work. And I've tried, I have a whole handful of different experiments here. These are all shims that I made to try to determine the correct thickness, and it was really fun. I don't recommend it. If you need to know what that thickness is, give me a holler and I'll measure it for you. I think it was 0.021 was the measurement that ultimately solved my problem. So I don't know if you can see it. Once this is on the gun, you can't see it, but there's a little seam right here around the front where the sleeve is. And then there's this gap where the two pieces join. I lined up with this gap so that it will look more natural, so maybe on first glance you won't notice the seam there. And then I left it a little bit short here so you don't see it looking from the other side. But the piece, once I got it formed, and the way I made it was I took the piece of shotgun barrel tube from this gun, and I took the metal and I just I heated it up very lightly with a torch, and then just took a hammer and just tapped it around until I got the circumference, until I got it rounded. I didn't want to kink it or wrinkle the metal in any way. And I trimmed it so that it would squeeze together tightly with no gap. Then once I got that, I cleaned it really well, and I blued that piece as well, just to give it some rust protection. And to also, I didn't want a silver ring on the edge of the barrel to make it look, I didn't want that to stand out. And my primary concern was rust. So I took the piece and soaked it in oil, and I greased it up really well. I'm more worried about moisture getting between the barrel and that sleeve and causing surface rust. So periodically I'm going to have to take it apart and clean it and just make sure that it's not rusting. But I would think that you'd probably have that same problem without the sleeve and just using this piece here. You still would have a rust problem, a gap possibly there. So anyway, that's how I got to this point. So from here to install this thing, what we have to do is take, let me grab a pointer stick here or something so you don't see my sausage-like fingers all day long. And so we have to take this clamp off, and we also have to take this little, I'll show it to you flat when I get them off. But I'm really bummed that I have to take this off because this is such a nightmare to put back on. If you ever had a Model 12 or a 97, you'll know what I mean, because this tube rotates to take the gun apart. So you've got to get it in the correct orientation, and then you've got to coordinate everything so that when these pieces are all together, the gun rotates back together and locks in place, and that you can still get to this piece right here. So anyway, loads of fun. Let me get this where we can see it so I can show you what I'm doing. Get this off the vise maybe and put it over here, and I will move the camera so that you can see the work area. And get my cables out of the way. Let's see here, right there. Okay, so there's two flat screws that hold this clamp in place. I'm gonna go ahead and take those out. If anybody needs these pieces, give me a holler. I can't imagine I'm gonna be using them for anything going forward. They're just gonna go in a Ziploc bag in my spare parts bin. So you have to be careful with these screws if you're doing this. These are very, very shallow, and it would be very easy to strip these screw heads out. So I'm trying to find a thin, but very wide screw tip, because otherwise you'll just abuse the heck out of these things. And so I have a couple of different screwdriver sets to try to find one that works best. That's a good one right there. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen these up. Okay. twist slowly. Remove this. So yeah, I spent a lot of time prepping and bluing all of these pieces. And now here I am just taking them off, never to be mounted on the gun again. But that's all right. Okay. And I'll show you that these are pretty intricate little pieces. You would think that it was just a simple clamp, but it really isn't. There's a few other considerations here. Get that out of there. Okay. Then I'm going to remove, there's 2 screws that hold this cap on, and I'm going to make sure that I don't lose my magazine spring here, which, well, it's funny to see. I don't want to do it right now. So I'm going to, and to get this out, this pin, it pushes in and out. What you have to do is there's a little spring-loaded arm in here that flips up. There's a little leg that locks into that sheet metal. And in the past, people have just grabbed this and just yanked them out with pliers or whatever, because they didn't really understand how it went together, and have damaged them. And then they ended up, bubbling it all back together. So you just take a screwdriver or something and you press down on this little black arm as you pull out, and it will depress that arm. And I'll show you when I get it out of here what I'm talking about. There we go. So get this in, I don't know if you can see this or not. There's a little arm right here, and it's spring loaded. So that pushes down, goes in and locks into that sheet metal. And what they end up doing is forcing this thing out and either breaking that off or just ripping the heck out of the magazine tube. So now I can remove these 2 little screws to get this magazine spring out. Be careful here. And I did drop one of these screws at one point and had to sweep. You can see that they're not just simple little screws. They have a very particular screw head on them and a very tiny, tight thread. So it wasn't like I was going to go to Ace Hardware and just pick up a screw. Let me move this out of my way. Get this off. So I had to sweep and vacuum, and what I do is sweep the heck out of the garage floor, and then I hit it with a shop vac, and then I take a big magnet and go through the dust in the shop vac to find parts. So anyway, take this out. So this piece goes away. This is the magazine cap. I'm going to take this spring out. Okay, this goes back in. This is the magazine spring. I'm going to put these screws in here so they don't get separated, and I know what they are. So like I said, if you have a Winchester 97 or a Model 12 and you need any of this stuff, give me a holler. It's all in good working order. I just won't have any use for it anymore. But interestingly, this piece right here that kind of goes up and the barrel, it saddles the barrel, has to be put on and oriented the correct way, because this all turns to loosen the barrel or the barrel in the magazine, so you can slide the whole gun apart. And you can see I don't know if it's coming up, but there's a cam right here. So you have to get the cam in this dished out surface right here. So you either get it right or you get it opposed 180 degrees. So that's what I'm saying is the complexity of putting this thing together. You have to sit there and test fit and tinker with it to get it all lined up properly. It's not as simple as screwing it all together. So now we can take this piece off. And you see this spring here provides tension between the magazine tube and the barrel so it doesn't rattle. And it fits in this little saddle. Let me get it out of there. You can see it's notched right here. There's a notch on either side, and it fits in the little saddle right in here. Well, let me better on this side, right here. So when you're putting this all together, it comes apart easier than it goes together. You slide this on, and then you have to slide this spring in there and get it right into that little saddle. And that is just a heck of a lot of fun to do without scratching the heck out of the barrel or the magazine tube. And then inside here is a special little fastener that those two screws clamp together. What I found, if you have to put one of these on, the easiest way to do it is to kind of spread this a little bit as you slide it on. It does have a little bit of movement in there. So I'm going to go ahead and put my screws back in it so they don't get separated from the piece. Bear with me as I tighten these up. I'm not going to screw them down very tight, just enough. So, and you'll notice here that the barrel has this lump on it. This is to give it. It corresponds to this to give it, you know, right here, so that it kind of locks in place, so this just doesn't slide arbitrarily along there. All right. Well, let's see how we did. So now this piece needs to go on because it mates up to our heat shield. So I'm going to go ahead and put my magazine tube or spring back in. And this is, I've never fit this piece, so I don't know. This will be an interesting experiment. I don't know which way it's supposed to go. Okay, well, at least it fits. So now I got to get that. I assume this hole gets lined up with that hole right there. I don't know. So now I'm going to drop that screw in there. And this is a weird screw. I can tell this guy and whoever works for him made this stuff by hand, because I don't know if the detail's showing up on the screen, but this is a screw that he's ground the head down to this weird screw head, and then he's stripped the threads off all the way up to here. So there's only just this little section of threads, and it looks like it was done by hand. It wasn't done on a lathe or, with anything with real precision. It's just a really interesting, and you could see a lot of the tool marks on the pieces themselves. So let's get that in there and see how it looks. And this is what usually happens on projects like this is I get it all together and figure out that I did something in the wrong order, and then have to take it all apart and do it again. So you may well see me do this 3 times, because there are no directions that come with this stuff. You just have to kind of go. Okay, that feels fairly tight. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of gun grease and I'm going to grease the inside of this again. It feels fairly dry. There's a little bit of moisture in there, but I really am paranoid about getting a whole bunch of moisture and water inside there. So I'm just going to use some of this. And I figure too much lube is better than no lube, or not enough. So I'm going to go ahead and try to get as much in there as I can. Put a little bit on the barrel. Wipe this off my hands. All right, so now this will slip on there with any luck. Okay. All right, Ed will be happy. This is where I get the hammer. And notice I'm using a plastic, soft, dead blow hammer. I would not use a steel hammer on this, because I do not want to mar the face of this piece. Let's see how that lines up. Looks like we got a little bit of an alignment problem here. Oh, there we go. I guess that moves.
Always with the hammers.
Got to have a hammer. Now, all right. Now my biggest concern is making sure that this dot is centered. I don't want everything canted. So what I would normally do if I was doing this on a regular shotgun, and I'll probably end up having to realign this later because it's just, I'll explain the process and kind of go through it briefly, but I may have to tweak it off camera. But what you do is you find, let me put this back in the vise and move the camera. Okay, get back in the frame here. And that's really not showing up as much detail as I would like, but let me twist the vise a little bit. See if I can get some better light on this because it's kind of interesting. Let's see here. Okay, that's a little better. So I have, Winchester has this kind of grooved checker pattern right on top of the receiver. So what I do is I find dead center of this, okay? I measure it and I find as close to dead center as I can get. And I'll take a Sharpie or something like that and I'll mark it on both ends, okay? So that gives me dead center on the receiver. And I want my bead on the end of the rifle or the end of the shotgun to be aligned with that dead center. I don't, and the only way I know to determine that, the way I do it is I mark it here and I mark it here, and then I run a string, a thin string, and I make sure that it's intersecting those 2 points, and I just continue that line down to the end of the barrel. And if you're really, really careful, you can also do it off of the stock. You can get another reference point back here off the stock. And so you align it as many points along the top as you can, finding dead center. And once you get that, then you mark the barrel and then you drill and tap. So that's how this will be aligned. I'm not going to do it right now because it's just tedious, but that's the technique I use. I'm open to suggestions if anybody has a better idea, but I can't think of any other way to really find dead center that's aligned with the receiver. All right, so let me make sure. Just make sure I'm reasonably close to center right here. I'm going to sight down the barrel. Yeah, it looks, give it a little bit of a tweak like that. All right, now I'm going to come over here and tighten these up. Give you a, yeah, this is, move it back. Give you a,
Did you tell us where the vise came from?
I believe I got it either off Midway or Brownells, and it's a nice vise. I'll show it once I get this thing tightened down. This is getting the right screwdriver. I really like it. It has a couple of really nice features, but one thing is the way it's comes out of the box. I had to stake the screw on the end of it. Otherwise, it would just screw itself apart. You'd go to open the vise and the handle would just spin right off. Really annoying. So, and I tried to thread lock it. That didn't work. So I got it in place and then just took a punch and a big hammer and staked the hell out of it. And so it's working now. But it's kind of a weird design to me that they wouldn't put some sort of a stop on it to keep you from spinning the handle right off. Okay, let me tighten this down nice and tight. And this I'm putting a fair bit of torque on because I don't want it to come off. I don't want it to move. Okay. There's 3 screws here that I'm tightening down. Okay. And I'm glad that nobody filmed me making that sleeve. That was just so much tedium. All right, let me go slow. Okay. All right. So right now we have a working trench gun. One thing I did do when I was test fitting this is and I need to maybe do a little bit more, is right here where this sheet metal comes down and intersects this corncob grip. It was razor sharp, and it just ripped. You can see cuts on my hand from racking the slide. So I took a file and I deburred it and then just rounded it off as much as I could. But still, keep your hand, on one of these, keep your hand down here where it's not up here on this like that, because I still worry that it's going to cut. But that there's a copy of a World War II trench gun. As soon as I get the bayonet, I've got the sling for it. Been working on that. I ordered a reproduction 1917 sling, the leather sling. You can use the canvas one. They use those as well. But in World War I, they used this one. I put a little bit of a stain on it and several coats of neat's foot oil, and it will go on the gun. As soon as I'm done, I had to get this piece on there before the sling will go on. But that's it. That's a Model 12 trench gun.